My name is Sarah Miller, a 24-year-old living in a small basement apartment in Illinois. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. My hands were shaking a little, but I held my briefcase tight. Inside that leather bag was the truth they were trying to bury. I saw them immediately. My parents and my brother were sitting in the front row. They looked perfect in their expensive clothes. When they saw me, my mother leaned toward my father and rolled her eyes. It was a small movement, but I saw it clearly. It was the same look she used to give me when I was a child and spilled milk on the counter. It meant I was a nuisance. It meant I was wasting their time. They thought this was over before it began. They thought I was the same quiet, weak daughter who would give up my grandfather's inheritance just to keep the peace. They expected me to surrender the $1.2 million because they told me I wasn't smart enough to handle it. They were smiling at their lawyer, confident and arrogant. They didn't know about the papers I had found. They didn't know I had passed the bar exam in secret. They thought I was walking in there to lose. They had no idea I was about to ruin them. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Sarah Miller, a 24-year-old. For as long as I can remember, I was the invisible child. If you looked at our family photos, you would think we were perfect. There was my father, a tall man who always wore a tie, even on weekends. There was my mother, who spent hours making sure her hair was perfect and that the house looked like a magazine cover. And then there was my brother, David. David was the golden child. He was 2 years older than me. When he was born, my parents acted like they had won the lottery. When I was born, it was like I was just an extra piece of furniture they had to find room for. The difference between us wasn't subtle. It was loud. It was in everything we did. When David turned 16, my parents threw him a party at a country club. They invited half the town. There was a DJ, a catered dinner, and a giant cake shaped like a football. At the end of the night, my father walked David out to the driveway. "Happy birthday, son," Dad said, his voice full of pride. He handed David a set of keys. A brand new red convertible was sitting there with a big white bow on top. David screamed. He hugged Mom and Dad. Everyone clapped. I stood in the back, clapping too, trying to smile. When I turned 16, my parents gave me a card and a $50 gift certificate to the mall. "We're a little tight on cash right now," my mother said, not looking at me. "College tuition for David is expensive." I nodded. "It's okay, Mom, thank you. I didn't get a car. I got a bus schedule. I spent my high school years waiting at bus stops in the rain. I watched David drive by with his friends, laughing. He never stopped to pick me up. My parents paid for his gas, his insurance, and his repairs. I had to pay for my own bus pass with money I earned babysitting. It wasn't just the money. It was the attention. If David got a C on a test, my parents hired a private tutor. They sat with him at the kitchen table, helping him, encouraging him. "You can do this, Davy," my dad would say. "You're smart. You just need to focus." If I got an A on a test, they didn't notice. I would put my report card on the fridge, hoping one of them would see it. It would stay there for days until my mother took it down to make room for a picture of David winning a soccer game. "You're a girl," my mother told me once when I asked why David got so much help. "You'll get married. David has to support a family one day. He needs the head start." That hurt. It made me feel like my future didn't matter. It made me feel like I was just waiting to be someone else's problem. So I stopped asking for help. I stopped expecting them to care. I got a job at a grocery store as soon as I was old enough. I worked nights and weekends. I scanned groceries for hours, my feet aching, my back sore. I saved every penny. When I got into college, my parents said they couldn't help me. "David's master's degree is costing a fortune," Dad said, shrugging. "You understand, Sarah, you're resilient, you'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I took out loans. I worked 2 jobs. I lived in a basement apartment that smelled like mold and had bars on the small windows. I ate instant noodles for dinner almost every night. I was tired all the time. I was lonely, but I had one person. Grandpa. My mother's father was different. He was a quiet man with rough hands and eyes that saw everything. He didn't like the way my parents treated me. He never yelled at them, but he would make comments. "You're spoiling the boy," Grandpa would say, watching David throw a tantrum because his steak wasn't cooked right. "And you're ignoring the girl who's actually working." My parents would just roll their eyes. "Oh, Dad, you don't understand modern parenting." Grandpa understood more than they knew. Every Sunday, I would go to Grandpa's small house. It was my sanctuary. He would make tea and we would sit on his porch. He didn't have much money, or so I thought. He wore the same flannel shirts for years. He drove an old truck. One afternoon I was crying. I was exhausted from work and school. I had just seen my parents posting photos on Facebook of a vacation they took with David to Hawaii. They hadn't even told me they were going. "Why don't they love me, Grandpa?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "What is wrong with me?" Grandpa reached out and held my hand. His grip was strong. "There is nothing wrong with you, Sarah," he said firmly. "Listen to me, charm fades. Your brother has charm. He knows how to smile and ask for things, but that fades when the money runs out." He tapped the table with his finger. "Grit lasts," he said. "You have grit, you know how to work, you know how to survive. That is worth more than a fancy car." Then he stood up and went to his desk. He pulled out a thick binder. "Come here," he said. I walked over. The binder was full of papers, receipts, bank statements, notes. "People lie," Grandpa said. "Memories change, but paper doesn't change. You keep your receipts, Sarah. You document everything. If you do work, you write it down. If someone promises you something, you get it in writing. You trust, but you verify." He looked me in the eye. "The world can be hard on women," he said. "Especially women like you who are strong but quiet. People mistake silence for weakness, so you keep your records. That is your shield." I took that lesson to heart. I bought a notebook the next day. I started writing things down. I kept every pay stub. I kept every email. I didn't know why I was doing it, really. I just trusted Grandpa. I didn't know that habit would one day save my life. When Grandpa died, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. He was 90 years old, but I wasn't ready. He was the only person who looked at me and saw me. My parents were sad, but their sadness felt performative. They wore expensive black clothes. They cried loudly at the funeral, making sure everyone saw their grief. David didn't even cry. He spent the funeral texting on his phone, hiding it behind his hymnal. I sat in the back row, just like I always did. I didn't have a designer dress. I wore my simple black work skirt and a blazer I had bought at a thrift store. I cried silently. I felt truly alone in the world. A week later, we were summoned to the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The office was in a tall glass building downtown. The conference room was huge, with a long mahogany table that looked like it cost more than my entire college education. The air smelled of lemon polish and old leather. My parents and David sat on one side of the table. They looked relaxed, confident. "Dad told me he was leaving me the vintage watch," David whispered to my mother, "and probably the house. He knew I needed a bigger place." My mother patted his hand. "Of course, sweetie. You were his only grandson. It's only right." They barely looked at me when I walked in. I sat on the opposite side of the table, clutching my purse. I felt small. I felt like an intruder in their family business. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, walked in. He was a serious man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He sat down at the head of the table and opened a thick folder. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was dry. "I know this is a difficult time, but Albert wanted his affairs settled quickly." My father leaned forward. "We understand, Bob. Let's just get to the details." Mr. Henderson nodded. He began to read. "To my daughter, Linda, and her husband, Robert, I leave my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $400,000. My parents smiled. They squeezed each other's hands. It was a lot of money. They looked satisfied. "To my grandson, David," Mr. Henderson continued. David straightened up, grinning. "I leave the family home on Elm Street." David fist-pumped the air. "Yes. That place is worth $500,000 easy." My mother beamed. "Oh, David, that's wonderful." I stared at the table. I expected nothing. Maybe a few books, maybe a picture frame. I was okay with that. I just wanted something to remember him by. "And finally," Mr. Henderson said. He paused. He looked over his glasses directly at me. "To my granddaughter, Sarah." My parents turned to look at me, their faces blank. "I leave the entirety of my educational and growth trust, accumulated over 60 years of savings and compound interest." Mr. Henderson flipped a page. "The current value of the trust is $1,200,000. The room went silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. I couldn't breathe. I blinked, sure I had heard him wrong. 1.2 million, that wasn't possible. Grandpa was a frugal man. He drove an old truck. My mother's face went pale. All the color drained out of her skin. She looked like she was going to be sick. My father's mouth dropped open. David let out a scoff. "Wait, what? You heard me, Mr. Henderson said calmly. The trust goes to Sarah. It is to be used at her sole discretion. That's a mistake, my father snapped. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That has to be a mistake. Dad would never give her that kind of money. She's barely getting by. She doesn't know how to handle money. It is not a mistake, Mr. Henderson said. Albert was very clear. He revised this will 6 months ago. But I'm the oldest, David shouted. I'm the grandson. Why does she get the cash? The house is nice, but it's old. It needs work. Liquid cash that's a fortune. My mother turned to me. Her eyes were not filled with pride. They were filled with ice. Sarah, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Did you know about this? Did you ask him for this? No, I whispered. I didn't know. You must have manipulated him, David spat. You went over there every Sunday. You were crying to him, weren't you? Playing the victim so he'd feel sorry for you. That is enough, Mr. Henderson said sharply. The will is valid. The meeting is adjourned. I stood up, my legs shaking. I grabbed the folder Mr. Henderson handed me. I wanted to run. Sarah, wait, my father said. His voice changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It was suddenly smooth. Fake. We need to talk about this. We're a family. We shouldn't let money divide us. I looked at them. For the first time, I saw them clearly. They weren't just disappointed. They were greedy. And they were angry that the invisible child had suddenly become visible. I have to go, I said. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes on my back. They weren't done with me, I knew it. For 2 days, my phone didn't stop ringing. My mother called. My father called. David sent texts that ranged from, hey sis, let's hang out, to you're being selfish, pick up the phone. I ignored them all. I went to work. I sat in my tiny apartment and stared at the checkbook the lawyer had given me. It felt unreal. It felt heavy. Grandpa had left me this because he believed in me. He believed in my grit. I couldn't mess this up. On the 3rd day, my mother sent a text. Please come to dinner tonight, just us. We want to apologize. We were just shocked. We want to make it right. I wanted to believe her. Deep down, despite everything, I still wanted a family. I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted them to say, wow, Sarah, Grandpa loved you so much, that's amazing. So I went. I drove my beat-up Honda to their house. It was a large, pristine house in the suburbs. The lawn was perfectly manicured. When I walked in, the smell of roast beef filled the air. It was my favorite meal. My mother came to the door and hugged me. It was a stiff hug, but it was a hug. I'm glad you came, she said. We sat down in the dining room. The table was set with the good china. My father poured wine. David was there, smiling. It felt nice. For about 20 minutes, we just ate and talked about the weather. I started to relax. Then the doorbell rang. Who is that? I asked. Oh, just a friend, my father said. Don't worry about it. A man walked in. I recognized him. It was Mr. Crowley, their personal family attorney, not Grandpa's lawyer, their lawyer. He was carrying a briefcase. My stomach dropped. The warm feeling in the room evaporated instantly. What is this? I asked, putting my fork down. Now, Sarah, calm down, my mother said. She reached across the table and tried to touch my hand. I pulled away. We just want to help you. Mr. Crowley sat down at the table. He didn't ask if he could join us. He just sat and slid a document toward me. It was titled Family Harmony and Asset Management Agreement. What is this? I asked again. It's for your protection, my father said. He leaned forward, putting on his wise father face. Sarah, let's be honest, you've never had money. You work at a grocery store. You have loans. $1 million is a dangerous amount of money for a young woman with no experience. We're worried about you, my mother added. We don't want you to blow it all on clothes or bad investments, or have some boyfriend steal it from you. I looked at the document. I started to read. The legal language was thick, but the meaning was clear. It said that I, Sarah, would voluntarily transfer the entire $1.2 million into a family trust, managed by my father and David. In exchange, the trust would pay off my student loans and give me a monthly allowance of $2,000. An allowance, I said, my voice rising. I'm 24 years old, I'm not a child. It's a generous allowance, David said, leaning back in his chair. You can quit that grocery job, you can live comfortably, and we'll handle the heavy lifting of investing the money. We'll make it grow for the whole family. For the whole family, I repeated, but Grandpa left it to me. He was old, Sarah, my father said sharply. He wasn't thinking clearly at the end. He probably thought you would share it. This is what he would have wanted. Unity. "If you don't sign this," Mr. Crowley said, speaking for the first time. His voice was cold and bored. "Your parents are prepared to contest the will in court. They will argue that Albert was mentally incompetent when he changed the will. It will tie the money up for years. You won't see a dime for a decade. And the legal fees will bankrupt you." It was a threat, a clear, naked threat. "You're impulsive, Sarah," my mother said, her voice turning hard again. "We are protecting you from yourself. Just sign the paper. Don't be difficult." I looked around the table. I saw my father, the bully. I saw my mother, the enabler. I saw my brother, the vulture. They didn't love me. They wanted to eat me alive. I stood up. My legs were steady this time. "No," I said. "Sit down," my father ordered. "No," I said louder. "I am not signing that. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He left it to me because he knew you would do this. He knew you would try to take it." "If you walk out that door," David said, standing up to intimidate me, "you're done. No family, no support. We will sue you until you have nothing." I looked at David. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel inferior to him. I felt sorry for him. He was a grown man who couldn't survive without his parents' help. "I have nothing to lose," I said. "I've been alone in this family for 20 years. I grabbed my purse and walked to the door. "Sarah," my mother screamed, "don't you dare walk away from us." I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air. I got into my old car and locked the doors. As I drove away, I saw them standing in the window, watching me. I was shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with rage. I thought the dinner was the worst of it. I was wrong. 3 days after I walked out, I was at home in my apartment. It was a Saturday morning. I was drinking coffee, trying to figure out how to find a lawyer of my own. I knew I needed help, but lawyers were expensive, and I hadn't touched Grandpa's money yet. I was scared to spend it. There was a heavy knock on my door. I opened it. A stranger was standing there, a large man with a thick neck. "Sarah Miller?" he asked. "Yes, you've been served." He shoved a stack of papers into my chest and walked away. I closed the door and looked at the papers. My hands started to tremble so hard I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, brown liquid splashing everywhere. I ignored it. I sat on the floor and read. It was a legal petition filed in the state court. Petition for conservatorship. Petitioner, Robert and Linda Miller. Respondent, Sarah Miller. The document claimed that I was financially incompetent and mentally unstable. It asked the court to appoint my mother as my conservator. This would give her total control over my life. She would control my bank accounts, my housing, my medical decisions, everything. It was like something out of a horror movie. I flipped to the section labeled Evidence. It was full of lies. Claim. The respondent has a history of reckless spending and inability to hold steady employment. Truth. I had worked the same job for 4 years and saved money every month. Claim. The respondent exhibits signs of delusion and has severed ties with family support systems. Truth. I walked out of a dinner where they tried to rob me. Claim. The respondent has a gambling addiction. Truth. I had never bought a lottery ticket in my life. They had sworn to these lies. They had signed their names to them. My own parents. The next day, things got worse. I went to work at the grocery store. My manager called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable. "Sarah," he said, "I got a call from a lawyer today. He said there's a legal dispute regarding your mental health and that you might be a liability to the store." "That's a lie," I said, panic rising in my throat. "My parents are suing me. It's a family dispute." "I believe you," he said, "but corporate is strict. Until this is resolved, HR says we have to put you on unpaid leave. I'm sorry." I walked out of the store in a daze. They were destroying my life. They weren't just trying to get the money, they were trying to break me so I would crawl back to them. I went home and curled up on my bed. I turned off my phone. I didn't eat. I just stared at the ceiling. Maybe they were right. Maybe I couldn't handle this. Maybe I should just give them half the money. If I gave them half, maybe they would leave me alone. I just wanted peace. I reached for my phone to call my mother. My thumb hovered over her name. Then my eyes landed on my bookshelf. Grandpa's binder was there. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. I felt a pull in my chest. "Grit lasts," he had said. I got up and pulled the heavy binder down. I sat on the floor among the broken coffee mug pieces I still hadn't cleaned up. I opened it. There were old receipts, letters, and then, in the back, a section I hadn't noticed before. It was marked "In case of emergency." I opened it. There was a copy of the trust agreement. The real one, not the summary the lawyer read. The full 40-page document. I started reading. I didn't understand all the legal words, but I read every line. Then I saw it. Section 7, subsection D. It was a paragraph about contesting beneficiaries. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. My heart started to pound. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Grandpa had written a note in the margin in his shaky blue pen. Trust but verify. Keep this safe, kiddo. They are wolves. He knew exactly what they were, and he had left a trap for them. I wasn't incompetent. I wasn't weak, and I wasn't going to surrender. I closed the binder. I didn't call my mother. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for forensic accountants and trust attorneys. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to war. I sat on the floor of my apartment for hours. The sun went down, and the room turned dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. I just kept reading the single paragraph in Grandpa's binder. My heart was beating a heavy rhythm against my ribs. Section 7, subsection D. The legal language was dense, but I broke it down slowly. I had gone to law school at night while working at the grocery store. My parents didn't know that. They thought I was taking general education classes at the community college. They never asked for details, so I never gave them any. I had passed the bar exam 3 months ago. I hadn't told anyone yet because I was waiting for the official swearing-in ceremony, and honestly, I was afraid of their judgment. I was afraid they would mock me or tell me I wasn't smart enough to be a lawyer. But now, my secret education was my weapon. I read the clause again. If any beneficiary under this trust contests the validity of this trust, or files any legal action to alter the distribution of assets as set forth herein, said beneficiary shall strictly forfeit their entire share of the trust. Their forfeited share shall be redistributed to the remaining non-contesting beneficiaries. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Grandpa knew. He didn't just leave me the money, he built a wall around it. He knew that if he gave the golden child David a house and my parents the investments, they would still want my share. He knew they were greedy. So he made a rule. If you try to take Sarah's money, you lose your own. If my parents proceeded with this lawsuit to declare me incompetent and take control of the trust, they were technically contesting the terms of the trust. If I could prove that, they would lose everything. The $400,000 portfolio. Gone. David's house, gone. It was a nuclear option, just like Grandpa had written in the margin. I needed to be sure. I needed a second pair of eyes. I couldn't trust my own judgment right now because I was too emotional. I was angry, hurt, and scared. I picked up my phone and dialed Jake. Jake was a guy I sat next to in constitutional law class. He was messy, loud, and wore wrinkled shirts, but he was brilliant. He had just opened a tiny solo practice in a strip mall near the highway. Sarah, he answered on the second ring. Everything okay? I haven't heard from you since the bar results came out. I need help, Jake, I said. I need to hire you. Hire me? For what? You're a lawyer too, almost. I'm the client this time, I said. And I need you to be the face of the case because I can't reveal my hand yet. Can I come over? Half an hour later, I was sitting in Jake's cluttered office. It smelled like stale coffee and old paper. I laid everything out on his desk. The petition my parents had served me, the forged family harmony contract they tried to make me sign, and Grandpa's binder. Jake read the petition first. He frowned. This is nasty, Sarah. They're going for a full conservatorship. They want to strip you of your rights. They're claiming you're delusional. I know, I said. Read the binder, section 7. Jake flipped through Grandpa's documents. He found the page. He read it silently. Then he read it again. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Holy cow, he whispered. Do they know this clause is in here? I don't think so, I said. This is the original master copy. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, read a summary at the will reading. He didn't read the fine print of the bylaws. And knowing my parents, they didn't read the 40-page document Mr. Henderson gave them. They probably just looked at the dollar amounts and stopped reading. Jake leaned back in his chair and whistled. This is a trap, a bear trap, and they just stepped right into it. If we file a response citing this clause, I said, what happens? If the judge upholds it, Jake said, tapping the page, they forfeit their inheritance. Your parents lose the investments. Your brother loses the title to the house. It all reverts to the trust. And who is the remaining beneficiary? I asked, even though I knew the answer. You, Jake said. It all goes to you. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't want their money. I didn't want David's house. I just wanted them to leave me alone. But they had started this war. There's more, I said. I need you to verify something else for me. Look at the dates. We spent the next 4 hours going through every piece of paper. We built a timeline. Grandpa signed the final version of the trust 6 months ago. He had a neurologist certify he was of sound mind on the same day. He was thorough. Your parents are claiming he was incompetent, Jake said. But we have a doctor's note from the same day saying he was fine. Their case is weak. But they're counting on you crumbling. They think you're just a grocery store clerk who can't afford a fight. They're going to be surprised, I said. So, what's the plan? Jake asked. Do you want me to file a motion to dismiss? No, I said. My voice was steady. I want to let them walk all the way into the courtroom. I want them to say it on the record. I want the judge to hear them lie. That's risky, Sarah. I know, I said. But if I just dismiss it, they'll try something else. They'll harass me for years. I need to end this. I need to sever the tie completely. Jake looked at me with respect. Okay, I'll file an appearance as your counsel for the preliminary hearings, but you said you want to handle the main argument. Yes, I said. I'll file my paperwork to be sworn in next week. By the time the hearing date arrives, I'll be a licensed attorney. I want to represent myself. It's poetic justice, Jake grinned. I like it. I left Jake's office feeling lighter. I had a plan, but I still had a heavy heart. I kept thinking about my mother. I remembered how she used to brush my hair when I was very little, before David became the center of her world. I remembered my father teaching me to ride a bike. Where had those people gone? Had they always been this way and I just didn't see it? Or had the money corrupted them? I drove home slowly. I stopped at the grocery store to pick up some food. I walked through the aisles where I used to work. My badge was gone. My manager avoided eye contact when he saw me in the produce section. I realized then that I was truly on my own. My family had rejected me. My job had suspended me. I was a ghost in my own town, but ghosts are hard to fight. You can't hurt something that has already lost everything. I went home, made a sandwich, and opened the binder again. I needed to memorize every word. I needed to be perfect. 2 weeks before the court date, a courier arrived at my apartment with another envelope. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Crowley, was busy. I opened the package. It was an amended motion. Inside, there was a new document I had never seen before. It was titled, Addendum to Trust dated January 2024. My stomach dropped. Grandpa died in March. This document was dated 2 months before his death. I read the text. It was short and simple. I, Albert Rossi, hereby express my wish that all assets be managed centrally by my daughter, Linda Miller, for the benefit of the entire family. This addendum supersedes previous distribution instructions regarding individual trusts. At the bottom was Grandpa's signature. I stared at it. It looked like his signature. It had the loops, the shaky A in Albert. If this document was real, my case was dead. The clause in the binder wouldn't matter because this new note would override the original trust. It gave my mother exactly what she wanted, control. I felt a wave of panic. Had Grandpa changed his mind? Had they pressured him when I wasn't there? I paced around my small living room. I felt sick. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they had won. Then I stopped. I looked at the document again. Something was off. I took the paper out of the plastic sleeve and held it up to the light. The paper was bright white. Crisp. Grandpa was old-fashioned. He bought his stationery in bulk in the 1990s. He used a specific type of heavy, cream-colored bond paper with a watermark that said Royal Cotton. All his letters to me, all the pages in the binder, were on that cream paper. This addendum was on standard, bright white printer paper, the kind you buy at Office Depot for $5. He wouldn't use this paper, I said out loud. I looked at the signature again. I got a magnifying glass from my desk drawer, a tool I used for reading fine print in textbooks. I held it over the signature. When you write with a pen, the ink flows into the paper fibers. The lines are smooth. But when I looked closely at this signature, the lines looked hesitant. There were tiny dots where the pen had stopped and started. It wasn't a fluid motion. It looked drawn, like someone was tracing it. And the notary stamp. I looked at the bottom of the page. Notarized by State of Illinois. Commission expires May 2028. I frowned. I went to my laptop and pulled up the Secretary of State's website. I searched for the notary's name, Jennifer A. Smith. Her commission was valid. But then I looked at the date she supposedly signed it, January 15, 2024. I went back to my calendar, January 15th. That was the day of the big snowstorm. The blizzard that shut down the entire city. The roads were closed for 2 days. Grandpa was in the hospital that week for his hip. I was with him almost the entire time. No notary came to the hospital room. They were lying. They hadn't just filed a frivolous lawsuit. They had forged a document. They had committed a felony. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was fraud. They were willing to commit a crime to steal my inheritance. I called Jake. "I need a forensic document examiner," I said, "and I need one fast." We found a man named Dr. Aris. He was an expert witness who had testified in federal trials. I took the document to his lab the next day. I also brought a stack of Grandpa's real letters for comparison. Dr. Aris was a quiet man with thick glasses. He put the documents under a microscope. He used ultraviolet lights. He scanned them into a computer. I sat in his waiting room for 3 hours, drinking bad water from a paper cup. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from adrenaline. Finally, Dr. Aris came out. He was holding a report. "It's a crude forgery," he said bluntly. "Not even a good one." "Tell me," I said. "First," he said, pointing to a screen, "the signature is a tracing. You can see the tremor of forgery. It's when the hand moves slowly to copy a line. The ink density is inconsistent." "Second," he continued, "the paper. This paper contains optical brighteners that were manufactured in late 2024, but the document is dated January 2024. The paper didn't exist when the document was supposedly signed." "And the notary?" I asked. "I can't speak to the person," Dr. Aris said, "but the stamp itself. The ink is digital. It wasn't stamped with a rubber stamp. It was printed onto the page with a high-resolution inkjet printer. It's a digital manipulation." I closed my eyes. They had photoshopped a notary stamp. "Can you testify to this?" I asked. "Absolutely," Dr. Aris said. "I'll write a full report. This will get thrown out of court in 5 minutes." "No," I said. "Don't tell them yet. Write the report, but I'm not sending it to their lawyer." "You have to disclose evidence," Dr. Aris said. "I will," I said. "I'll disclose it in the courtroom. It's impeachment evidence. I can save it for the hearing if they lie on the stand." I paid Dr. Aris with my savings. It cost me $2,000, almost everything I had left in my checking account. I was eating rice and beans, but I held the smoking gun. My parents weren't just bad parents. They were criminals. That realization broke something in me. The last tiny thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, they loved me deep down, it snapped. You don't commit felonies against people you love. You don't try to frame your daughter with fake documents. I drove home in silence. The city looked gray and ugly. When I got home, I put Dr. Aris's report in my briefcase. I put it right next to Grandpa's binder. I was ready to destroy them, but I needed one more thing. I needed to know why. Why were they so desperate? $1 million is a lot of money, but they had their own money. They had the house, the cars, the status. Why risk jail for my share? I needed to follow the money. I spent the next 3 nights awake. I didn't sleep. I became an investigator. If I was going to walk into that courtroom and dismantle my family, I needed to understand the battlefield. I needed to know why they were attacking me with such ferocity. Greed is powerful, but desperation is stronger. This felt like desperation. I started with public records. In the United States, a lot of financial trouble is public if you know where to look. Property liens, court cases, business filings, it's all there in the county clerk's database. I started with my brother, David. David had an MBA. He always bragged about his startup company, TechStream. My parents were always talking about how successful he was. "David is a CEO," my mother would tell the neighbors. I searched TechStream LLC in the state business registry. Status: involuntarily dissolved. The state had shut down his company 6 months ago because he hadn't paid his taxes. I dug deeper. I searched the civil court records for David's name. The list was long. Lawsuit: landlord versus David Miller, unpaid commercial rent, $45,000. Lawsuit: American Express versus David Miller, credit card debt, $62,000. Lawsuit: Investor Group A versus TechStream, breach of contract, $230,000. I did the math on a notepad. David was in debt for nearly $340,000. He wasn't a rich CEO, he was broke. He was drowning. That explained why he needed the house. But why did he need my money? I moved on to my parents. They had always been the picture of stability. My father had a good job as a consultant. They lived in a big house. They drove Mercedes. I searched their property records. My breath caught in my throat. Notice of default/pre-foreclosure. Filed 3 months ago. They hadn't paid their mortgage in 8 months. They owed the bank $485,000 on the house. They had taken out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, and maxed it out. Why? Where did the money go? I looked at my father's retirement accounts. I couldn't see the balances, obviously, but I found a court filing from a previous lawsuit involving a car accident he had 2 years ago. In the financial disclosure for that case, he listed his assets. His retirement account was almost empty. I pieced the puzzle together. My parents had been funding David. They had poured their retirement money into his failing startup. They had paid his rent. They had paid his credit card bills. They had remortgaged their house to keep his CEO lifestyle afloat. They had set themselves on fire to keep him warm. And now, the fire had burned everything. They were all broke. The foreclosure was coming. The lawsuits were coming. That's why they needed Grandpa's money. The $400,000 Grandpa left them wasn't enough. It would barely cover the mortgage debt. They needed my $1.2 million to clear David's debts and save their own house. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to loot me to pay for their mistakes. I sat back in my chair, feeling a mix of pity and disgust. It was tragic, really. They had loved David so much, spoiled him so much, that they had ruined him. And in the process, they had ruined themselves. And instead of admitting it, instead of coming to me and saying, "Sarah, we made mistakes, we are in trouble, can you help us?" they tried to steal from me. They tried to declare me incompetent. They tried to erase me. Because admitting they needed my help would mean admitting they were wrong. It would mean admitting that the invisible daughter was the only one who had actually succeeded. Their pride wouldn't allow that. So they chose theft instead. I printed out every document, the foreclosure notice, the dissolved company status, the debt lawsuits. I put them in a red folder. This was the motive. When the judge asked why they forged the document, I would show him this. It proved they had a reason to lie. The morning of the hearing arrived. I put on my suit. It was the same suit I wore to the funeral, but I had ironed it carefully. I polished my shoes. I tied my hair back in a tight bun. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but my eyes were clear. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. "You are not the victim anymore. You are the hammer." I grabbed my briefcase. It was heavy with evidence. I drove to the courthouse. It was a gray, rainy Tuesday. I parked my car and walked toward the massive stone building. I saw my parents' car in the parking lot. It was dirty. They hadn't washed it. A small sign of their crumbling life. I walked through the metal detectors. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I walked down the hallway toward Courtroom 402. I could see them sitting on a bench outside the doors. My mother, my father, and David. They were huddled together, whispering with Mr. Crowley. When I got close, they looked up. My mother's eyes scanned me from head to toe. She sneered. "You actually showed up," she said. "I thought you'd have the sense to stay home." "Hello, Mother," I said calmly. "It's not too late, Sarah," my father said. He looked old. His face was gray. "Just sign the agreement. We can tell the judge we settled. We can stop this embarrassment." "There won't be a settlement," I said. David laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "You think you can win? You're a grocery clerk, Sarah. Mr. Crowley eats people like you for breakfast." Mr. Crowley didn't look at me. He was checking his watch, looking bored. He thought this was a routine probate case. He thought he was just crushing a bug. "We'll see," I said. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. I walked to the table on the left, the defendant's table. I set my briefcase down. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I opened the latch, click, click. I took out the binder. I took out the red folder. I took out the notary report. I stood there, alone, waiting for the judge. They sat at the other table, 3 of them against one of me. They looked confident. They were rolling their eyes, whispering jokes. They had no idea that I wasn't just Sarah the daughter anymore. I was Sarah the prosecution, and I was about to rest my case. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Harrison walked in. She was a stern woman with sharp glasses and a no-nonsense attitude. She sat down and adjusted her robes. "Calling the matter of the estate of Albert Rossi," she said. "Petition for conservatorship." My parents stood up. Mr. Crowley buttoned his jacket and smiled. "Good morning, Your Honor," Crowley said smoothly. "Representing the petitioners, Robert and Linda Miller." "And the respondent?" the judge asked, looking at my empty table. "Is Sarah Miller present?" She is here, Your Honor, Crowley said, gesturing to me with a dismissive hand. But she is unrepresented. As we noted in our petition, there are questions regarding her competence to handle these proceedings. The judge looked at me. Miss Miller, do you have counsel? I stood up. My legs felt like steel. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice rang out clear in the quiet room. I am represented. By whom? The judge asked. By myself, I said. I am Sarah Miller, counsel of record. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois, bar number 62,944. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. I heard a gasp from the other table. I didn't look, but I knew it was my mother. Mr. Crowley froze. He looked at me, then back at the judge. I wasn't aware. I was sworn in last week, Your Honor, I said. I am fully competent to represent myself and this estate. The judge raised an eyebrow. A small smile touched her lips. Very well, counselor, proceed. Mr. Crowley tried to recover. He launched into his speech. He talked about how my parents just wanted to protect the family assets. He talked about my history of instability. He presented the fake affidavits about my spending. I waited. I let him talk. I let him dig the hole deep. When he was done, the judge turned to me. Miss Miller, your response? I walked to the center of the room. I held Grandpa's binder. Your Honor, I said, the petitioners claim I am incompetent. This is false. But more importantly, this entire petition is a violation of the trust itself. I handed the bailiff the original trust document. I direct the court's attention to Section 7, subsection D, I said. The no contest clause. The judge put on her glasses and read it. The room was silent for a long minute. This clause states, the judge read aloud, that any beneficiary who sues to alter the distribution forfeits their share. Exactly, I said. By filing this petition to remove my control over my inheritance, my parents and brother are contesting the validity of the trust. Therefore, under the terms my grandfather wrote, they have forfeited their assets. Mr. Crowley jumped up. Objection, that clause is standard boilerplate. It doesn't apply to a conservatorship hearing. It applies to any legal action attempting to alter distribution, the judge said sharply. Sit down, Mr. Crowley. My father's face was turning red. David looked like he was about to throw up. However, Mr. Crowley stammered, we have an amendment, an addendum signed by Albert Rossi that overrides that clause. He pulled out the forged document. We filed this yesterday. This was the moment. Your Honor, I said softly, I object to that evidence. On what grounds? The judge asked. On the grounds that it is a forgery, I said. My mother shouted, you liar. The judge banged her gavel. Order. I walked back to my table and picked up Dr. Aris's report. Your Honor, I said, I have a sworn affidavit from Dr. Aris, a certified forensic document examiner. This report confirms that the paper used for that addendum was manufactured in late 2024. My grandfather died in March 2024. Unless my grandfather came back from the dead to visit Office Depot, he could not have signed that paper. I handed the report to the bailiff. The judge took it, she read it. Her face grew darker and darker. She looked up at Mr. Crowley, her eyes were scary. Mr. Crowley, she said, her voice dangerously low, did you verify the authenticity of this document? My clients provided it. Crowley was sweating now. He was backing away from my parents. And the notary, I added. The stamp is a digital inkjet print, it's fake. The judge looked at my parents. They were shrinking in their seats. My mother was crying now, but it wasn't fake tears this time. It was terror. And if the court wonders why my family would commit fraud, I said, pulling out the red folder, it is because they are insolvent. I laid out the debts. The foreclosure, the bankruptcy. They are not here to protect me, I said, looking directly at my father. They are here to rob me because they have lost everything. The judge set the papers down. She took off her glasses. She looked at my family with pure disdain. I have heard enough, she said. She didn't even leave the bench to deliberate. The petition for conservatorship is dismissed with prejudice, she ruled. I find that the petitioners have violated the no contest clause of the Rossi Trust. Therefore, their rights to any inheritance are hereby forfeited. No, my mother wailed. Furthermore, the judge continued, raising her voice. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into fraud, forgery, and perjury. Mr. Crowley, you will report to the Bar Association for a review of your conduct. And finally, the judge looked at me. Miss Miller, the entirety of the trust is yours. Do you have any requests? I looked at my family. They were broken. My father had his head in his hands. David was staring at the wall. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I just want to go home." "Granted," the judge said. "Court is adjourned." She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. I packed my briefcase. I didn't smile. It wasn't a happy moment. It was a funeral for the family I never had. I walked past them. My mother reached out and grabbed my arm. "Sarah," she sobbed. "Please, the house. We're going to lose the house. Where will we go?" I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I gently removed it. "I don't know," I said. "But you have grit. You'll figure it out." I turned and walked out of the courtroom doors. I didn't look back. It has been 1 year since that day in court. A lot has changed. My parents lost the house. The bank foreclosed on it 2 months after the trial. I heard they moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. My father had to come out of retirement and get a job at a hardware store. My mother works part-time as a receptionist. David filed for personal bankruptcy. He moved in with them. I imagine it's crowded in that apartment. I imagine there is a lot of yelling. They tried to contact me a few times. Letters, emails, calls from strange numbers. They ranged from begging for money to blaming me for their ruin. I never replied. Not once. I blocked their numbers. I returned their letters unopened. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to survive. I realized that they are like a black hole. If I get too close, they will pull me in and crush me. I kept my promise to Grandpa. Since they forfeited their shares, the entire $1.6 million, the trust plus their lost investments, and the value of the house equity that wasn't there, technically came to me. But I didn't keep their share. I didn't want their bad luck. I took the money that would have gone to them, about $400,000, and I started the Albert Rossi Scholarship Fund. It provides full tuition for students who work part-time jobs while in school, students who have grit. I think Grandpa would have liked that. He always hated seeing hard workers get overlooked. As for me, I used my inheritance to pay off my student loans. I bought a small, comfortable house with a big porch, just like Grandpa's. I adopted a dog, a scruffy terrier mix I named Justice. And I opened my own law firm. I didn't join a big corporate firm. I rented a small office on Main Street. The sign on the door says, Sarah Miller, Attorney at Law. I specialize in elder law and trust litigation. Every day, people come into my office. Often, they are the black sheep of their families. They are the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones being bullied by greedy relatives. They sit in my chair and cry. They say, I don't know what to do. My family is trying to take everything. I listen to them, I pour them tea, and then I lean forward and look them in the eye. I know exactly how you feel, I tell them. And I know exactly how to stop them. I teach them to keep their receipts. I teach them to document everything. I teach them that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. I am happy now. It is a quiet happiness. I don't have big family dinners on holidays. Sometimes, on Christmas, I feel a little pang of loneliness. But then I remember the courtroom. I remember the look in my mother's eyes when she thought she could control me. And I remember the freedom of walking out those doors. Peace is expensive. It cost me my family. But as I sit on my porch, drinking tea and watching the sun go down, I know it was worth every penny. I kept my receipts. I kept my dignity. And most importantly, I kept my